Even after 10 years, Loretta's voice still had the power to make the room feel colder. "Mara, darling, is that you?" The familiar, crisp tone sliced through the chatter of the salon, sending a shiver down my spine. I turned to face my former mother-in-law, her perfectly coiffed hair and tailored suit a jarring contrast to the casual atmosphere. "Loretta," I managed, my throat tightening. "What are you doing here?" Her eyes narrowed, scanning me with disdain. "Is that any way to greet family? Especially after all this time." She pursed her lips, ignoring the curious stares from the other stylists and clients. I fought the urge to recoil, steadying my voice. "We both know you never considered me family." Loretta waved a dismissive hand. "Water under the bridge, my dear. I'm actually here because I need your help." Her gaze flickered with something I couldn't quite place. "It's about Eli." My ex-husband's name hit me like a punch to the gut. I hadn't spoken to him in nearly a decade, not since Loretta orchestrated our bitter separation shortly after Avery's birth, cutting me off from my own daughter. "You have some nerve," I said through gritted teeth. "After everything you put me through, everything you cost me." "Please, Mara." Loretta's tone softened, but her eyes remained steely. "This isn't about the past, it's about Avery." My heart clenched at the mention of my little girl, now a young woman I barely knew thanks to Loretta's machinations. I opened my mouth, but the words stuck in my throat. Loretta leaned closer, her voice lowering. "Eli's in trouble, deeper than I can handle alone, and my health." She trailed off, a rare vulnerability flickering across her features. I studied her for a long moment, 1,000 memories and recriminations swirling in my mind. Part of me wanted to turn away, to sever the last thread tying me to that toxic family. But the thought of Avery, caught in the crossfire of whatever drama Loretta had woven, tugged at my heart. Finally, I exhaled a long breath. "All right, Loretta, I'll hear you out, but I'm not making any promises." A ghost of a smile played across her lips, and for a fleeting instant I saw the same calculating glint that had haunted me for years. "Of course, dear. That's all I ask." As Loretta slid into the chair across from me at the cafe, I steeled myself for whatever bombshell she was about to drop. Her perfectly manicured nails drummed against the table, a nervous tic I recognized from our past encounters. "I don't have much time to mince words, Mara," she began, her voice lowered to a conspiratorial tone. "Eli's in deep trouble, and it's all my fault." I tensed at the mention of my ex-husband's name, memories of our toxic marriage flooding back. "What did you do this time, Loretta?" She bristled at my accusatory tone. "Don't take that tone with me, young lady. I'm trying to make things right." Her brow furrowed, and for a moment she looked every bit her age. "Eli's gambling addiction has spiraled out of control. He's racked up debts with some unsavory characters, and they're threatening to come after Avery if he doesn't pay up." A chill ran down my spine. My own daughter, caught up in the mess Loretta had created. Why should I believe a word you say? I shot back, my voice sharpened by years of pent-up anger. "You've done nothing but manipulate and lie since the day we met." Loretta recoiled as if I'd slapped her. "You think I wanted any of this?" she hissed. "I tried to mold him into the man this family needed, but he was weak, just like his father. This is the price of my failure as a mother." I scoffed, shaking my head in disbelief. "Failure as a mother? You drove a wedge between us from the start, Loretta. You never gave our marriage a chance because you couldn't stand the thought of not being in control." Her eyes flashed with fury, but she remained silent, her lips pressed into a thin line. In that moment, I saw the truth laid bare. Her selfish need for power had destroyed not just my life, but her own son's as well. "You threw me out when I needed family the most," I continued, my voice thick with emotion. "What could you possibly want now?" Loretta's gaze dropped, and for a long moment she said nothing. Finally, she met my eyes, her own brimming with unshed tears. "I want to make it right, Mara, for Avery's sake, if nothing else." I studied her closely, searching for any hint of deception, but behind the poise and arrogance, I saw only a broken woman, grasping at one last chance to salvage something from the wreckage she'd created. "What did you have in mind?" I asked cautiously, silently bracing myself for whatever new manipulation she had up her sleeve. Loretta took a deep breath, her perfectly manicured nails drumming against the tabletop. "I want you to come live with us, Mara. Be the stabilizing force Eli and Avery so desperately need." I nearly choked on my coffee. You can't be serious, I sputtered. After everything you've done, you expect me to just waltz back into that toxic environment? Do you think this is easy for me? Loretta snapped, her composure slipping. Swallowing my pride and asking for your help? But Eli's spiraling, and I'm not getting any younger. If he keeps going down this path, my entire legacy could be squandered. I shook my head in disbelief. Of course, it all came back to her precious legacy and control over the family fortune. Your greed is what got us into this mess in the first place, Loretta. Why should I trust you now? She leaned forward, her eyes boring into mine with an intensity that gave me pause. Because for once, my interests align with yours. We both want what's best for Avery. My breath caught in my throat at the mention of my daughter's name. It had been nearly a decade since I'd last seen her, just a young girl ripped from my arms by Loretta's manipulations. The thought of being reunited with her, of protecting her from the chaos Eli had created, tugged at my heart. You'll have a chance to make things right, Loretta pressed on, sensing my hesitation. To be the mother you always wanted to be, isn't that worth taking a chance? I searched her face for any hint of deception, but her expression remained earnest. Or was I just seeing what I wanted to see, falling for her lies once again? All right, I said slowly, my mouth suddenly dry. I'll do it, but not for you, Loretta, for Avery. A satisfied smile crept across her lips. Of course, dear, whatever you say. As she rose to leave, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that I was walking into yet another trap, one expertly laid by the master manipulator herself. But the prospect of reconnecting with my daughter, of offering her the stability and love I'd been denied, outweighed my misgivings. He's ruined, Mara, Loretta said, her voice low and urgent. If not for him, do it for Avery. And with those parting words, she was gone, leaving me to wrestle with the weight of my decision and the sinking suspicion that I was merely a pawn in her latest game. I stared at my reflection in the mirror, barely recognizing the woman staring back at me. The lines on my face seemed deeper, etched by years of heartache and loneliness. Was I really considering walking back into the lion's den, putting myself at Loretta's mercy once again? A soft knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. Come in, I called out, turning to see Grace letting herself in, a concerned look on her face. You've been awfully quiet since our lunch the other day, she said, taking a seat on the couch. What's going on in that head of yours? I sighed, sinking down next to her. Grace had been my rock through the darkest days, holding me together when Loretta's machinations threatened to tear me apart. If anyone could help me make sense of this tangled mess, it was her. Loretta wants me to move back in, I confessed, the words feeling surreal as they left my lips, to help with Eli and Avery. Grace's eyes widened in disbelief. After everything she put you through? Mara, you can't seriously be considering this. I have to at least try, Grace, I insisted, my voice thick with emotion. Avery is caught in the middle of their dysfunction, and I owe it to her to be there. Grace reached out, giving my hand a gentle squeeze. But at what cost to yourself? That woman nearly destroyed you once. Who's to say she won't try again? Her words struck a chord, dredging up memories I'd tried so hard to bury. The constant belittling and manipulation, the emotional abuse that had left me a hollow shell of my former self, all orchestrated by Loretta's cruel hand. You're right, I whispered, blinking back tears. She's a viper, and I'd be a fool to trust her again. Grace pulled me into a comforting embrace, and for a moment I allowed myself to be enveloped in her warmth and support. Maybe it's not about giving them a second chance, she said gently, pulling back to meet my gaze, but about giving yourself one. Her words hung in the air, their weight slowly sinking in. For years, I'd been defined by my past, by the pain and rejection Loretta had inflicted upon me. But what if this was an opportunity to reshape my narrative, to confront those demons head-on and reclaim the life I deserved? You're right, I said, feeling a newfound resolve stirring within me. It's time I stopped running from my past and faced it head-on. Grace beamed, giving my shoulder an affectionate squeeze. That's my girl. Just promise me you'll be careful, okay? I don't want to see you get hurt again. I nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. Don't worry, I've got this. It's time to show Loretta that she doesn't hold all the cards anymore. As I spoke the words, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, replaced by a steely determination. No more hiding, no more running. This time I would face my demons on my own terms and emerge victorious, no matter the cost. The imposing wrought iron gates of the Blackwood estate loomed before me, their intricate patterns casting eerie shadows in the fading light. Taking a deep breath, I steeled my resolve and pressed the call button on the intercom. "State your business," a gruff voice barked through the speaker. "It's Mara," I replied, my mouth suddenly dry. "Loretta is expecting me." There was a momentary pause, then a harsh buzz as the gate swung open with a groan of protest. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, willing my hands to stop shaking as I guided my car up the winding driveway. The sprawling mansion looked just as I remembered, cold, imposing, every inch a monument to Loretta's wealth and status. I cut the engine, the silence pressing in around me like a vice. "You've got this," I muttered under my breath, grabbing my bag from the passenger seat. Time to face the demons. The heavy oak door swung open before I could knock, and there stood Loretta, perfectly coiffed as ever, regarding me with a critical eye. "You're late," she said by way of greeting, her tone clipped. "I expected more punctuality from you, Mara." I bristled at her condescending tone, but bit back the retort on the tip of my tongue. "My apologies. Traffic was heavier than I anticipated." Loretta pursed her lips, clearly unimpressed with my excuse. "Well, come in then. No sense standing out in the cold." I followed her into the cavernous foyer, my eyes adjusting to the dim lighting and hushed atmosphere. Not a single thing had changed. The same antique furniture, the same austere decor, the same oppressive air of joyless affluence. "This house hasn't changed," I remarked, unable to contain the edge of bitterness in my voice. "Cold and full of secrets, just like its owner." Loretta whirled on me, her eyes flashing with barely contained fury. "Mind your tongue, Mara," she hissed. "You're here on my terms, remember?" I opened my mouth to respond, but the sound of footsteps on the marble staircase drew our attention. My breath caught in my throat as a young woman descended, her features achingly familiar. "Avery," I whispered, drinking in the sight of my daughter, now a beautiful young woman of 18. She paused on the landing, her eyes narrowing as she studied me with guarded curiosity. "So you're the one Gran's been going on about," she said, her tone laced with skepticism. "The big solution to all our problems." Before I could reply, another figure appeared at the top of the stairs. Eli. My ex-husband looked haggard and worn, his eyes rimmed with dark circles and his clothes rumpled. He regarded me with a mixture of surprise and wariness, as though I were a ghost from another life. "Well, well," he muttered, descending the stairs to stand beside Avery. "If it isn't the prodigal wife returning." Acid rose in my throat as I struggled to maintain my composure in the face of their blatant hostility. Squaring my shoulders, I met Eli's gaze head-on. "I'm not here for you," I said, my voice low but unwavering. "I'm here for Avery, to try and undo the damage you've clearly inflicted on her life." Eli recoiled as if I'd struck him, while Avery's eyes widened fractionally. Loretta cleared her throat, stepping between us with a tight smile plastered across her face. Now, let's not get ahead of ourselves," she chided, resting a hand on Avery's shoulder in a gesture that seemed almost possessive. "We're all family here, are we not?" Her words rang hollow, the false veneer of civility doing little to mask the undercurrent of tension crackling through the air. As I looked from Eli's broken form to Avery's guarded expression, I knew in that moment that Loretta had bulk. Well, truly met her match. This was going to be a battle, and I had every intention of emerging victorious, no matter what it took. The days that followed were a tense dance of forced civility and thinly veiled hostility. Eli avoided me like the plague, while Avery regarded me with a mixture of curiosity and wariness, clearly unsure what to make of this sudden reappearance in her life. Loretta, ever the consummate hostess, maintained a facade of familial harmony, but I could see the cracks in her composure growing wider with each passing day. Something was brewing beneath the surface, and I knew better than to let my guard down. It all came to a head one evening as I was making my way to the kitchen for a late-night cup of tea. As I passed Loretta's study, the soft glow of a lamp caught my eye, along with the unmistakable sounds of shuffling papers. Curiosity got the better of me, and I found myself drawn to the slightly ajar door. Peering through the gap, I saw Loretta hunched over her desk, a frown creasing her brow as she pored over what appeared to be legal documents. "This has to be airtight," This she muttered to herself, scribbling furiously. No room for error. I leaned closer, straining to make out the words on the pages before her. My heart nearly stopped when I saw the words "Last Will and Testament" emblazoned across the top. Of course. It all made sense now. Loretta's sudden invitation, her insistence on having me under her roof once more. This was never about reconciliation or righting past wrongs. It was about securing her wealth, using me as a pawn to control Avery's future. White-hot anger surged through me as the pieces fell into place. Loretta was up to her old tricks, manipulating everyone around her like marionettes on a string. Well, not this time. I'd been fooled once, but never again. Before I could stop myself, I pushed open the door and strode into the study, my hands balled into fists at my sides. Loretta's head snapped up, her eyes widening in surprise and alarm. "Mara, what are you doing in here?" "Cut the act, Loretta," I spat, snatching the papers from her desk and waving them in her face. "I know what game you're playing." Her expression hardened, the mask of false civility slipping away to reveal the cold, calculating woman I knew so well. "So you figured it out, have you?" she sneered. "Took you long enough." "It was never about redemption," I accused, my voice trembling with fury. "It was always about control, using me to keep a leash on Avery, just like you tried to do with me all those years ago." Loretta rose from her chair, her lips curling into a cruel smile. "Oh, Mara, always so naive, even after all this time." She tutted softly, shaking her head. "Did you really think I'd let some washed-up hairstylist waltz back into my family and undo everything I've built? This is about preserving my legacy, and if you can't see that, then you're even more foolish than I thought." I recoiled as if she'd struck me, her words cutting deeper than any physical blow. In that moment, I saw the true depths of her depravity, the lengths she would go to maintain her iron grip on our lives. "You're a monster, Loretta," I whispered, hot tears stinging my eyes, "and I'm going to make sure everyone knows the truth about you." Her laughter was like nails on a chalkboard, grating and mocking. "Go ahead and try, dear. Who do you think they'll believe, me or the bitter ex-wife with a grudge?" As she spoke those words, I knew she was right. Loretta had spent years cultivating her image, weaving an intricate web of lies and deceit. But this time I had proof of her true nature, tangible evidence of her manipulation. Squaring my shoulders, I met her gaze with newfound resolve. "We'll see about that, Loretta. This isn't over, not by a long shot." With the documents clutched tightly in my hand, I turned on my heel and stormed out of the study, my mind already whirring with plans for how to expose Loretta's true colors to the world. The battle lines had been drawn, and this time I had no intention of losing. The tension was palpable as Loretta's extended family gathered for her annual summer garden party. Elegantly dressed guests milled about the perfectly manicured grounds, sipping champagne and exchanging polite small talk while a string quartet provided a refined backdrop. I lingered near the refreshment table, nursing a glass of lemonade and scanning the crowd for any sign of Avery. If I was going to expose Loretta's machinations, I needed her granddaughter on my side. "There you are." Loretta's saccharine voice cut through the din as she materialized at my elbow, her perfectly coiffed hair and impeccable pearl ensemble a sharp contrast to the fire burning in her eyes. "I was beginning to think you'd skipped out on us and missed the chance to spend quality time with my favorite family," I countered, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Perish the thought." She fixed me with a withering glare. "Watch your tone, Mara. We have appearances to maintain." "Is that all you care about?" I shot back, unable to contain my mounting frustration. "Keeping up your pristine image while you manipulate everyone around you like puppets?" Loretta's perfectly sculpted features contorted with rage, her mask of gentility slipping. "How dare you speak to me that way?" she hissed, leaning in close. "After everything I've done for you, ungrateful wretch." "Done for me?" I laughed bitterly. "You mean like driving a wedge between me and my own daughter? Or using me as some pawn in your twisted game to control Avery's inheritance?" Her eyes widened fractionally, and I knew I'd struck a nerve. Before she could respond, a familiar figure emerged from the crowd. "Gran, everything okay over here?" Avery approached us, her brow furrowed with concern as she took in the palpable tension between Loretta and me. Loretta immediately plastered on a sickly sweet smile. "Of course, darling. Your grandmother and I were just catching up." I couldn't resist the urge to scoff audibly, drawing Avery's curious gaze. Seizing the opportunity, I pressed on, heedless of Loretta's furious glare. "Your grandmother's been keeping secrets from you, Avery," I said, my voice low and intense. "About her real reasons for bringing me back into this family." Avery's eyes flicked uncertainly between us as Loretta spluttered indignantly. "Don't listen to her lies, sweetheart. She's clearly unwell." But I was on a roll now, propelled by years of pent-up anger and resentment. Fishing the crumpled legal documents from my pocket, I thrust them toward Avery. "See for yourself. She's been plotting to use you to control your inheritance and keep her grubby hands on the family fortune." I turned to Loretta, my gaze blazing with righteous fury. "You used everyone as your pawns, Loretta, but this is where it ends." A hush fell over the gathering as heads turned in our direction, drawn by the commotion. Loretta's face drained of color, her perfectly composed veneer cracking to reveal the ugliness lurking beneath. Avery stared at the documents in her hands, her expression shifting from confusion to dawning realization as the truth sank in. Slowly, she lifted her gaze to meet Loretta's, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Is it true, Gran?" she asked, her voice small and tremulous. "Have you been lying to me this whole time?" For a long, agonizing moment, Loretta said nothing, her lips pressed into a thin, bloodless line. Then, with a sigh of resignation, she gave a curt nod. "I did what I had to do," she said stiffly, "to protect our legacy, our family name." Avery recoiled as if struck, shaking her head in disbelief. "You're unbelievable," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "All this time, I thought—" Her words trailed off as she turned toward me, a silent apology in her eyes. In that moment, I knew I'd won, not just the battle against Loretta's manipulations, but Avery's trust as well. As the gathering dissolved into hushed whispers and furtive glances, Loretta stood alone, her meticulously constructed facade in ruins around her, the master puppeteer at last unmasked. The gentle tinkle of the bell above the door mingled with the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee and the soft murmur of conversation. I took a moment to savor the warmth and energy of the bustling salon, a contented smile tugging at my lips. "Order up for table 4. Avery's voice rang out from the small kitchen area, drawing a chorus of laughter from the group of regulars gathered around one of the cozy bistro tables. It had been 6 months since that fateful evening, when the truth about Loretta's schemes finally came to light. In the aftermath, everything had unraveled with startling swiftness. The strained relationships within the family, the tightly guarded web of control Loretta had so carefully constructed, all of it crumbling like a house of cards. Avery had been my fiercest ally throughout, standing by my side as I navigated the messy legal battles and bitter recriminations that followed. With her support, I'd finally been able to extract myself from the toxic grip of Loretta's influence, emerging stronger and more determined than ever before. And now, here we were, partners in more than just name, having pooled our resources to open this quaint little salon and cafe, a cozy oasis worlds away from the cold opulence of the Blackwood estate. "Incoming!" Avery called out in mock warning as she deposited a tray, laden with steaming mugs and pastries on the table, to a round of cheery thanks. I watched her work the room with a natural grace and warmth, effortlessly charming the customers as she topped up coffees and swapped friendly banter. In those unguarded moments, I could see so much of myself in her. The same resilient spirit, the same quiet determination that had carried me through the darkest days of my divorce and estrangement. "We're not just rebuilding our lives, Avery," I murmured, catching her eye as she circled back toward the counter. "We're reclaiming them." She flashed me a conspiratorial grin, sliding an arm around my shoulders in a quick, affectionate squeeze. "You got that right. No more letting other people dictate our story." Her words struck a chord deep within me, a poignant reminder of just how far we'd come. For so long, I'd allowed Loretta's toxicity and manipulation to define my narrative, to strip away my autonomy and sense of self-worth. But not anymore. This salon, this vibrant hub of warmth and community, was a living testament to our perseverance, a reclamation of the life I'd always envisioned for myself and my daughter. A life free from the shadows of bitterness and control that had loomed over us for far too long. As the afternoon stretched on, and the hum of lively conversation and laughter filled the air, I found myself stealing furtive glances at the framed newspaper clipping mounted proudly on the wall. The bold headline, "Family Feud Erupts, Blackwood Empire in Turmoil," felt like a relic from another lifetime, a stark reminder of just how far we'd come. Loretta's once formidable influence had withered in the wake of her exposed machinations, leaving her isolated and diminished, a specter of her former self. The vast fortune and legacy she'd safeguarded so ruthlessly had slipped through her grasping fingers, a fitting cosmic comeuppance for the suffering she'd inflicted. But dwelling on her downfall brought me no satisfaction, no sense of victory or revenge. As I surveyed the cozy warmth of the salon, my gaze settling on Avery's radiant smile, I realized that this, the hard-won bond between mother and daughter, the freedom to forge our own path, was the greatest triumph of all. No more pawns in someone else's game, no more victims of manipulation and control. Just two women, boldly authoring the next chapter of their lives on their own terms. And in that moment, awash in the contentment and possibility that surrounded us, I knew our story was just beginning. The moonlight spilled across the room, casting a serene glow on what should have been a peaceful honeymoon suite. But the tranquility was a facade, shattered by hushed voices that sliced through the stillness and into my heart. Ethan's words, laced with deceit, were like venom. "She's asleep. It's a real shame it's not you I'm marrying, Natalie." I lay still, my heart pounding in my chest. I was supposed to be sleeping, lost in dreams of our new life together. Instead, I was a silent spectator to my own betrayal. The cold realization settled in. My sister Natalie and my husband Ethan were plotting against me. On our honeymoon. "Ethan, you're wicked." Natalie's voice was soft coo, a stark contrast to the storm raging inside me. "But what if Lauren finds out?" "She won't. I've made sure of that." Ethan's confidence was chilling. Tears threatened to escape, but I willed them back. I couldn't reveal my awareness. Not yet. I needed to know more, to understand the depth of their treachery. As their whispers faded into the night, my mind raced. The memories of our wedding day, once vibrant and joyful, now twisted into a cruel joke. Natalie, always in the shadows, waiting to snatch what was mine. And Ethan, the man I had loved and trusted, the architect of my heartbreak. I remembered the white dress Natalie wore at the wedding, how it stood out, a deliberate choice to upstage me. Ethan's compliment to her then made sense now, a signal of their hidden alliance. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, painting a picture of deceit I couldn't ignore. When dawn broke, I rose from the bed, a plan forming in my mind. I was Lauren Harper, and if they thought they could play me for a fool, they were sorely mistaken. I was going to fight back, not just for my pride, but for every moment they had stolen from me. I slipped out of the room, my steps silent but determined. The cool morning air was a balm to my seething anger. I needed evidence, undeniable proof of their betrayal. It was the only way to ensure they couldn't wriggle out of their web of lies. Returning to the room, I found Ethan and Natalie in a seemingly innocent breakfast conversation, but the undercurrent of their secret was palpable. I joined them, my facade of ignorance perfectly in place. "How did you sleep, Lauren?" Ethan asked, his voice a sickening blend of concern and deceit. "Like a baby," I lied, my voice steady. "I feel completely refreshed." Natalie smiled, but her eyes couldn't mask the guilt. "That's great. Today's going to be amazing." Yes, it would be, but not in the way they expected. The morning sun glared through the windows, a stark contrast to the turmoil brewing within me. As Ethan and Natalie chatted about the day's plans, my mind wandered back to the wedding, the day when the seeds of deception were sown. The memory of Natalie in her white dress at my wedding was vivid, an intentional act of defiance against unwritten social rules. The dress wasn't just an outfit choice, it was a statement, a silent declaration of her intentions. Ethan had complimented her, "That flowy dress suits your petite frame." His words, once innocuous, now echoed with hidden meaning. I remembered feeling a twinge of unease then, quickly dismissed as wedding day jitters. But it was more than that. It was my intuition sensing the undercurrents of betrayal. The way Ethan's eyes lingered on Natalie, the stolen glances they thought I hadn't noticed. Our honeymoon in Bali was supposed to be an escape, a celebration of our love. Yet here I was, trapped in a nightmare of my own making. The realization that Natalie had followed us here was like a punch to the gut. How could she? How could they? I excused myself from breakfast under the pretext of needing fresh air. Alone on the balcony, I allowed myself a moment of vulnerability. The tears came then, hot and unrelenting, but with each tear shed my resolve hardened. I wiped my face, my tears not a sign of weakness, but fuel for the fire of revenge burning within me. Back in our room, I began my plan. I needed evidence, something concrete to expose them. I rummaged through Ethan's belongings when he was in the shower, looking for any proof of their affair. Then, in his coat pocket, I found it. A small piece of jewelry, a locket I had never seen before, unmistakably feminine. I held the locket, a tangible piece of their deceit. It was more than enough to start my retribution. I placed it back carefully, covering my tracks. They wouldn't know I was onto them, not until I was ready to strike. The rest of the day was a blur, a performance of the happy bride while my mind plotted their downfall. Each smile, each touch from Ethan was a lie that added to the ledger of his betrayal. And Natalie, playing the role of the doting sister, was no better. As night fell and they retreated to their secret rendezvous, I lay awake. My heart was a battleground of sorrow and rage. But amidst the chaos, one thing was clear. They had underestimated me. Lauren Harper was not a victim. She was a woman scorned, and she would have her revenge. The following days in Bali were a masterclass in deception. Ethan and Natalie believed their secret safe, but I was watching, gathering the pieces of their treachery to weave their downfall. I started by accidentally leaving my phone recording in our room when I knew they'd be alone. The things they said, their words were like daggers. "Lauren's nice and all, but she's so naive," Natalie chuckled. Ethan's reply was a twist of the knife. "That's what makes this easy. She trusts us completely." Hearing my sister and husband mock my trust was a searing pain, a betrayal that transcended heartbreak. But it fueled my resolve. This recording was the evidence I needed, but I wanted more. I wanted them to feel a fraction of the pain they caused me. One evening, as we strolled along the beach, I brought up our wedding. "Ethan, didn't Natalie look stunning in that white dress? Almost like a bride herself," I said, my voice laced with feigned innocence. Ethan stuttered, his facade cracking. "Well, yeah, it was a nice dress." Natalie shot him a look, a silent warning. "Oh, it was just a dress, Lauren. You were the star, of course." Their discomfort was palpable, a small victory in my silent war. But my greatest move came the night before we were to leave Bali. I had convinced them to have a farewell dinner, a toast to our wonderful honeymoon. Little did they know, I had arranged for a private investigator to take photos of their secret meetings. As we raised our glasses, I smiled, the predator, not the prey. "To new beginnings," I toasted, my words heavy with unspoken meaning. "To new beginnings," they echoed, unaware of the storm on the horizon. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought of the life I had envisioned with Ethan, of the future we were supposed to have. But that life was a lie, one I was no longer willing to live. Tomorrow, I would leave Bali, but I wouldn't be leaving alone. I would be taking their secrets, their lies, and turning them into weapons of my own. The journey back from Bali was a silent one. Ethan and Natalie chatted idly, unaware of the storm brewing within me. As we landed, I felt a sense of liberation, the chains of their deceit no longer holding me. At home, I acted quickly. I contacted a lawyer, presenting the evidence I had gathered. The recordings, the locket, and the photos from the investigator painted a clear picture of Ethan and Natalie's affair. My lawyer, a stern-faced woman with a sharp mind, was appalled. "We'll make sure they get what they deserve, Lauren." That evening, as Ethan returned from work, I greeted him with a smile, masking the turmoil inside. "How was your day, dear?" I asked, my voice dripping with feigned sweetness. "It was good, busy as usual," he replied, oblivious to the undercurrents. Natalie, who had come over for dinner, added, "You must be exhausted, Ethan. Let me get you a drink." Watching them, a sense of disgust washed over me. How could they be so callous, so cruel? Dinner was a charade. Ethan and Natalie played their parts well, but I could see the cracks in their armor. Every smile, every touch between them was a confession of their guilt. "Lauren, this dish is amazing," Ethan complimented, his words hollow. I smiled, my heart hardening. "I'm glad you like it. I wanted to make something special tonight." As the night wore on, I excused myself, citing tiredness. Alone in my room, I finalized my plans. Tomorrow, I would confront them, expose their lies for all to see. I had arranged for our families to meet under the guise of a belated wedding celebration. It would be the perfect stage for my revelation. The next morning, as we gathered at the venue, the tension was palpable. Ethan and Natalie were nervous, their smiles strained. Our families chatted, unaware of the drama about to unfold. I stood, glass in hand, commanding the room's attention. "I'd like to propose a toast," I began, my voice steady. "To truth and honesty, the foundation of any relationship." Ethan's eyes widened, a flicker of fear passing through them. Natalie's hand trembled ever so slightly. "To truth and honesty," the room echoed, raising their glasses. The moment had come. "I have something to share," I announced, my voice ringing clear. "Something about Ethan and Natalie." The room fell silent, all eyes on me. This was it, the moment of reckoning. The moment when the mask of deceit would fall, and their true faces would be revealed for all to see. The air in the room was thick with anticipation as I faced our families and the two people who had betrayed me the most. Ethan and Natalie looked like deer caught in headlights, their facades crumbling under the weight of impending exposure. "I've discovered something unsettling," I began, my voice unwavering. "Ethan and Natalie have been having an affair, since before our wedding." Gasps filled the room. Ethan's face drained of color, while Natalie's eyes darted around, looking for an escape that didn't exist. "This can't be true," Ethan stammered, his voice betraying him. Natalie chimed in, her tone desperate. "Lauren, you're mistaken. This is crazy." I held up my phone, playing the recording of their conversation in Bali. Their own words filled the room, irrefutable proof of their deceit. "You're lying." Ethan's facade broke, anger replacing the fear. "You invaded our privacy." "Our privacy?" I echoed, my voice laced with scorn. "The privacy to betray me, your wife?" Natalie's eyes were filled with tears, but they sparked no sympathy in me. "Lauren, please, I never meant for this to happen. It just..." "Just what, Natalie? Just happened to fall in love with my husband?" My voice was icy, cutting through her excuses. Ethan turned to our families, pleading, "This isn't what it looks like. Lauren's just upset." My father stood up, his expression a mix of anger and disappointment. "Ethan, how could you do this to our daughter? And Natalie, you're her sister!" The room erupted into chaos, with family members voicing their shock and disgust. Amidst the turmoil, I remained calm, the eye of the storm. This was the retribution I had sought, the exposure of their true selves. Ethan's mother approached me, her eyes filled with sadness. "Lauren, I am so sorry. We never knew Ethan could do something like this." Natalie was sobbing now, her image of the innocent sister shattered. "I'm sorry, Lauren. I never wanted to hurt you." Their apologies were empty, meaningless. The damage was done, the betrayal too deep. "I want a divorce, Ethan," I stated firmly. "And Natalie, consider our sisterhood over." As I walked out of the room, leaving behind the shattered pieces of what was once my life, I felt a surge of empowerment. They thought they could break me, but I emerged stronger, like the architect of their downfall. In the wake of the revelation, the fallout was immediate and severe. Ethan and Natalie found themselves isolated, their actions casting them adrift in a sea of judgment and scorn. I met Ethan one last time to finalize the divorce proceedings. He was a shadow of the confident man he once was, his eyes hollow with loss. "Lauren, can't we talk about this? I know I made a mistake, but..." "A mistake, Ethan?" I cut him off, my voice cold and unyielding. "You call an affair with my sister a mistake? There's nothing to discuss." He reached out, but I stepped back, out of his reach forever. "I never thought you'd take it this far," he said, a note of disbelief in his voice. "You never thought at all, Ethan. That was your mistake." With that, I left him standing alone, a man undone by his own actions. Natalie fared no better. Our parents, once her staunch defenders, were appalled by her behavior. They cut her off, both financially and emotionally. She tried to reach out to me, her messages a mix of apologies and pleas for understanding. "Lauren, please, I'm your sister. We can fix this," she texted. Her words a desperate clawing for redemption. I replied with a single sentence that severed our bond for good. "You ceased being my sister the moment you betrayed me." The community around us was unforgiving. Ethan's career suffered as his reputation crumbled. Natalie found herself ostracized, her social circle closing its doors to her. They were pariahs, their names synonymous with betrayal and deceit. In their downfall, I found a bitter satisfaction. They had underestimated me. thought they could use me as a pawn in their selfish game. But I turned the tables, exposing them for who they truly were. Yet, even in victory, there was a sense of loss. The end of my marriage, the severing of ties with my sister. These were wounds that would take time to heal. But I was determined to move forward, to rebuild my life on my own terms. As I watched Ethan and Natalie grapple with the consequences of their actions, a part of me took solace in the fact that justice, though harsh, had been served. They received the karmic retribution they deserved, a fitting end to their sordid tale. The weeks following the confrontation were a time of introspection and rebuilding for me. I watched as Ethan and Natalie's lives unraveled, their once bright futures dimmed by the shadow of their betrayal. One afternoon, I encountered Ethan in a coffee shop. He was alone, a far cry from the confident man he once was. "Lauren," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I've lost everything. My job, my reputation. I never realized how much I'd lose." I looked at him, seeing the man I once loved now broken by his own doing. "You didn't just lose, Ethan. You chose. You chose this path when you decided to betray me." He looked down, the weight of his choices etched on his face. "I'm sorry, Lauren. Truly sorry. Your apologies can't undo the past, Ethan. You have to live with what you did, just like I do." Leaving Ethan in his solitude, I walked away, feeling a sense of closure. I had moved past the need for revenge. My healing wasn't about them anymore. It was about me. Natalie's fall from grace was equally stark. Ostracized and alone, she reached out to me one last time. "Lauren, I've lost my job, my friends. I have nothing. Please, can't we put this behind us?" I responded with the finality of someone who had crossed a bridge and burned it behind her. "What we had as sisters is behind us, Natalie. You made your choice, and now you live with it. I've moved on." I heard the defeat in her silence, a silence that spoke volumes. In the months that followed, I threw myself into my work and my personal growth. I discovered strengths I never knew I had, and weaknesses I was now brave enough to face. The betrayal had shattered me, but in its wake, I found the pieces of who I truly was. Reflecting on everything that had happened, I realized that the experience, as painful as it was, had taught me invaluable lessons. About trust, about resilience, and about my own worth. As I looked to the future, I felt a sense of hope. I had risen from the ashes of my old life, stronger and more self-assured. The path ahead was mine to shape, and I stepped forward with confidence, ready for whatever came next.